Chapter 58, Caleb. The morning sun filtered through the screens of the east courtyard, painting everything in clean golden light. Birds chirped, and the breeze stirred the vines curling along the carved eaves. And Caleb Joe wanted to break something. He sat on a polished bench near the central koi pond, his fingers curled loosely around a ceramic teacup, the warmth saturating his fingers. Claire had poured it for him without comment, without a smile, without even looking at him. They were still together, technically. They shared a bed, a schedule, and meals, when the staff remembered to prepare something for both of them. But the fire between them, the hungry, conspiratorial connection he remembered from their rise, had turned to ice. It wasn't bitterness or conflict, just absence. Claire asked him how he slept and told him when she was heading out. Occasionally, she updated him on the Wang estate's social, political, and military obligations with all the warmth of a steward dictating a report. She wasn't cruel, just indifferent. That indifference cut deeper than rage ever could. She used to light up when he entered a room. She used to run her fingers along his arm when she thought no one was watching. She used to remind him without saying a word that she'd chosen him, that they'd won. But now she offered polite nods, neutral tones, and hollow questions that didn't want answers. What a difference 3 months had made. He wasn't sure when it had started to fade. Was it their return to his parents' house? Was it Ethan's appearance, filled with confidence and strength? Or had it been when Vivian showed up with gifts and beauty, stealing Claire's thunder? That night had been awkward. Everyone, including Claire, seemed to want to talk to Ethan, not him. It was as if Ethan mattered and he did not. How could he not matter? He was the eldest, the golden child, the one destined to change the world. But Claire, his mother, his siblings, and even Vivian, they didn't seem to care about him. Caleb exhaled sharply. His hand twitched, and the tea rippled in its cup. Vivian. Of all the things that had gone wrong, she was still the one who kept him awake at night. Not Claire, not Ethan, her. He remembered the first time he saw her in his last life, draped in violet and silver, eyes like a winter storm, mouth set in that cold, perfect line that promised nothing and dared anyone to ask for more. She had power, cultivation, bloodline, and most of all, presence. People bowed without realizing it. They spoke more carefully in her shadow. She was the most delicious thing he had ever seen. And Caleb, son of Zhou, golden heir of a rising martial clan, had tried. He tried so hard. He went to her family functions. He waited in the rain outside her training hall. He offered gifts, tributes, swords, and spirit beasts. He tried to correct her bad behavior. He attempted to guide her the way a man of his caliber should. He told her she didn't need to worry about all the house matters. He would handle them for her. After all, she was a woman, and what would happen when she had all his babies? He was willing to be with her, to sleep with her, to have her serve him, to lead her. He would have given her everything, his name, his strength, his body, his loyalty. She gave him nothing. No warmth, no affection, no approval. She didn't want his help despite his obvious martial talent and intellect. She offered silence wrapped in silk and treated him like a footnote. Worse, every time he turned away, she ran to that bastard June. She was smiling, speaking softly, touching his sleeve as if she'd forgotten Caleb even existed. He'd convinced himself she was just slow to trust, that she would warm to him in time. He was the better choice. Everyone knew it, even the general, who never offered acknowledgement despite Caleb's obvious superiority. He thought that recognizing him was the obvious conclusion, that she would give in and understand her place. But she never did, and she didn't even act well enough to recognize her simple obligation to him. In their past life, she hadn't even shown up at the Zhou household. He remembered it bitterly. In all the years they were married, Vivian Lee never set foot on the Zhou estate. Not once. It started with the traditional home return. Caleb had the servants at the house prepare gifts. The other in-laws ignored him, but still allowed him to use their resources. But despite him ordering her as her husband to attend with him, she blew him off. She left for some sword retreat the very next morning, as if she needed to wield a sword with him around. He'd come home with a single steward who spent most of his time insulting him. He had almost killed the man. Meanwhile, Claire and Ethan back then had come together. They spent a bunch of time laughing, touching, and even kissing. Most of their time was spent laughing, not in front of him, never directly, but he'd heard it. Laughter echoing down the corridor, private smiles, conversations that stopped when he entered a room. They never said a word to him. They never claimed to bet her outright, but they didn't have to. He could see it in the way Claire looked at Ethan. They thought their relationship was greater. Claire, back then, thought Ethan was more than Caleb. It was the most ludicrous thing he had ever seen. How could Ethan be superior to him? Life didn't get any easier for him after that. Vivian never accepted her place by his side. His in-laws, jealous of his talent and charisma, actively suppressed him. Despite his clearly superior individual strength, even he couldn't stand up to the combined jealousy of the Lai house. It all came to a head when, After Caleb demanded that Vivian fulfill her wifely duties, she, after a dirty sneak attack, beat him half to death and tossed him out of her house. Meanwhile, Ethan and Claire rose to prominence, with Claire becoming a peak human realm expert. The thought caused him to heavily crack his teacup. He didn't move. He let the hot liquid soak in. He let the sting remind him that he was still here. Still flesh, still the rightful heir of House Joe. He had been the golden son, the one with power in his veins, the one meant for greatness. He was faster than Ethan, stronger, more charismatic, better looking, smarter even if Ethan had some accolades in that area. He was simply better. Everyone knew it. Everyone had seen it. But it was Ethan that rose, not him. It had happened in his last life. He and Claire had been seen as better than him. Now it was happening again. They were focused on Ethan. Vivian, his wife, to whom he had been married for almost 10 years, was with his brother. That was to be expected. He had orchestrated it. Ethan was stupid, slow, and definitely less handsome. Vivian was beautiful and cold, looking down on people who were clearly better than her. They were perfect for each other. But then the script failed. Ethan impressed the world with his restraint. Vivian appeared on his behalf. She showed up. And was acting affectionate? Impossible. Was Ethan so pathetic that he had scraped and sulked his way into Vivian's affection? He couldn't even get started on the Lynn daughter showing up all bouncy and faking innocence, pretending she wasn't interested in him. Caleb had wanted to shout, to roar, to tear the damn hall apart and remind them who he was. But he didn't. He knew he was chosen. He was better. Why else would he be reincarnated? The demon war was coming. He was obviously chosen to be the hero. He had been waiting for a goddess, because it obviously had to be a goddess. A god would be jealous, to give him his sacred mission. But to date, nothing. Now everything with Ethan, Vivian, and Claire was different. Ethan had always been ordinary, and this new version wasn't. He was making himself unforgettable in every conversation, every interaction, every whispered rumor. Caleb could feel himself slipping. Claire didn't reach for him anymore. His father had stopped calling him to counsel. Even the servants walked more carefully around the estate, as if waiting for something to fall. The world had turned upside down. All of it came back to Ethan. Caleb stood. The cracked cup dropped from his fingers and shattered against the stone. He didn't flinch. He stared across the pond, past the flickering shadows of koi beneath the surface, past the trees, past the courtyard walls. He looked toward the rising sun and the distant conceptual silhouette of House Lee. He would not be forgotten. He would not be a footnote in someone else's story. He was the hero of the story, and he would make sure everyone understood that. Chapter 59, Caleb. The tea had long since dried on his palm, sticky and cooling, but Caleb didn't notice. Not really. His mind was already turning. Claire hadn't returned to the residence. He'd waited. Told himself it didn't matter. She'd been out more often lately, taking long walks alone, asking fewer questions. But this time, something needled him. A servant mentioned she'd gone to meet with a merchant envoy. A merchant envoy? She was waiting for a merchant envoy? Claire hated trading functions. Even when she and Ethan had hosted trade banquets at the Wang estate in their last life, she barely tolerated the small talk and business posturing. So why would she go out of her way now to receive some trading envoy? Caleb rose from the bench, cleaned his hand on the hem of his sleeve, and followed the corridor out toward the eastern pavilion's unused wings of the Wang estate, mostly given to overgrown but not necessarily messy courtyards, and a few grow boxes that his mother-in-law thought were cathartic. A good place to speak with someone quietly. He rounded the stone archway that opened onto a forgotten lotus pond and paused. Claire was already there. She stood beneath a crooked spirit lantern tree, actually laughing with three figures in mottled travel robes. Their clothes were plain but tailored, clearly expensive. Layers draped for movement. They looked like they belonged at the imperial palace. That was the first thing that made Caleb's instincts stir. Who are these jesters? Why are they meeting with his wife in secret? And why do they look so rich? The second thing that caught Caleb's attention was how still they were. No fidgeting or idle shifting. The stillness was eerie. But the men were just calm, balanced, watching everything. Every breath, every glance calibrated. And then there were their eyes. They were off. Two of the men were lean and sun-darkened, with short-cut hair and strange accents. But it was the third who really stood out. He was tall, elegant, and motionless, in a way that suggested not stillness, but containment, as if movement would unleash something dangerous. His skin was pale as chalk, his robes perfectly straight, and his eyes. They were too light, but had a strange dullness to them, as if they were empty. He held a scroll case tucked beneath one arm, wrapped in lacquered cord, and sealed with a seven-pointed glyph Caleb didn't recognize. Claire was smiling up at him like an old friend. Caleb didn't step forward or call out. He wanted to speak, but something about the interaction was elaborate. He just watched instead. And the pale man Vale Moraine, he heard Claire say, looked up and met his gaze across the pond. The smile he gave Caleb was small, polite, and utterly hollow. Vale didn't blink, didn't look away, just nodded once in acknowledgement, then turned and walked off, silent as smoke. The other two followed. Claire remained. She exhaled, smoothed her hair, and turned only to find Caleb still watching. Her mouth tightened. "Spying on me now?" she asked coolly. "I didn't know I needed permission to walk through our estate," Caleb replied, voice low. "Who were they?" "Traders," she shrugged. "Ah, from the southern coasts. Artifact brokers." "You never liked traders." "I like people who bring useful things." Her eyes flashed. They deal in spirit-bound relics, rare scrolls, power that isn't hoarded by the big families." Caleb stepped closer, voice hardening. "Power like what? Forbidden glyphs? Blood-inked seals? What was in that case?" Claire's chin lifted. "You sound like a bitter, noble housewife. Do you care because I'm speaking to them, or because you're not getting enough attention?" The words struck deeper than he let show. Claire shook her head and turned. "That they've offered nothing illegal, and even if they had, what would it matter? You haven't asked what I'm studying in weeks. Because you don't tell me anymore. Because you stopped listening." She didn't wait for a reply. Her footsteps rang sharp against the flagstones as she disappeared around the corner, leaving only the faint scent of peach oil and incense in her wake. Caleb stared after her for a long time. The breeze stirred the pond. Somewhere overhead, the spirit lantern flickered and dimmed. He turned back toward the spot where Vale had stood, gaze narrowing. There was something wrong with them, something too icky. That word isn't very manly, but that was the only word he could think of. They dressed like merchants, but no real traders moved like that. And that scroll tube, that glyph. Caleb was sure he'd felt a pulse of rejection from the wards when it passed by, like the estate itself didn't want it here. And Claire? Claire hadn't laughed like that since their wedding. She was different, even in the last life. Her strength had exploded out of nowhere. Her techniques, strange, patchworked things that didn't come from any known sect. She never said where they came from. She just smiled and grew stronger, cold, distant, obsessive. And then, eventually, broken as she ran away from the fight with the demon horde. He'd always assumed it was Ethan's fault. Ethan was a weakling, but he wasn't a bad guy. Maybe he just couldn't handle his wife rising to power. That he was too much in the shadow of such an amazing woman to stand on equal ground. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was something else. Maybe it was these men. This Vale Moraine. The name tasted like glass. Clean, sharp, manufactured. Caleb clenched his fists, then forced them to relax. He wasn't stupid. If these people helped Claire before, they might help her again. But this time, he wasn't going to be left out. This time, he would get closer. Not because he trusted them, because he didn't. Because whatever they were, whoever they worked for, they had power. And Caleb was done being the brother left behind.
Chap 60. Claire. The wind returned in her dreams. Not a whisper, but a song through soft grass beneath her feet. The scent of jasmine bloomed, sweet and sharp, guiding her. A voice, low and gentle, flowed like warm honey, guiding her through a breath cycle she'd never been taught, but somehow remembered with perfect clarity. Let the pulse settle. Let the mana find its root. You're not fighting it. You're dancing with it. A smile touched her lips in the dream. Her skin glowed, meridians open and light, and a boundless strength suffused her. She was powerful here, stronger than she'd ever been in her waking life. The man stood beside her, his form shadowed by the sun. He was tall and calm, his hand brushing hers as they knelt in a vibrant clearing. Together, they refined a technique, not learned from scrolls or inherited from ancestors, but created from shared understanding. She turned to him, desperate to see his face, to etch his features into her waking mind. But his image shimmered, blurred, then vanished. She blinked and he was gone. Now only the echo of an argument remained. Her voice, sharp with anger, tore through the dreamscape. His eyes, dimmed with a hurt that felt like a physical blow, held her gaze but offered no reply. She struck him and watched him stumble back. Watched herself turn away, burning the bridge behind her. What? The question screamed in her silent mind, but no answer came. The pain in his dream eyes followed her, twisting into visions of fire and ruin. Buildings collapsed like brittle paper. The wind shrieked with the agony of a dying world. The sky was dark, slick with ash. Bodies lay broken across shattered stone plazas and desecrated ceremonial halls. Sacred runes bled chaotic light as beasts, unlike anything she knew, roared from the rift between stars and soil. She ran, barefoot and bloody, clutching a random child that wasn't there. Not anymore. Power surged through her, raw and untamed. Flames curled from her fingertips. Her aura cracked the earth beneath her steps, and it meant nothing. The sky wept blood. The heavens burned. Her power seared through the demon horde, but it never stopped. There was always more, and more, and more. She stumbled, fell, and when she looked down at her own hands, they weren't hers anymore. Silver-threaded veins pulsed beneath skin, nails like obsidian claws, flesh rippling with sigils she didn't recognize. Her reflection shimmered in a cracked spirit glass pane. She was no hero. She was no scholar. She was something else, a monster. Then came the black tower rising behind her like a spear in the sky, singing with an unnatural, crushing pressure. The stone wept ink. The air screamed around it. And a voice. A voice she couldn't quite remember but knew she would never forget. You traded everything for power, and now you carry it alone. Claire bolted upright in her bed, breath ragged, a scream caught in her throat. The sheets clung to her sweat-slicked skin. Her nightrobe was twisted tight around her waist. Her hair stuck to her neck in damp ropes. Another dream, worse than the last, more real. Her stomach twisted, a knot of cold dread. She swung her legs off the mattress and pressed her feet to the cold floor, grounding herself, reaching for breathwork. Anything to dispel the lingering terror. Nothing worked. Her cultivation was frayed. Meditation wouldn't hold. Her meridians had been rejecting focus for days now, like her own body was pushing her away. She touched her lower abdomen and flinched. This wasn't just mana imbalance. Wasn't just nerves. Something was profoundly wrong. She hadn't told Caleb. She didn't want to see his face. Not now. Not when all she could see in her dreams was a man who wasn't him. A man she had loved and betrayed. But that was insane. She was married to Caleb. Proud son of Joe, a warrior and heir. And yet, why did every time he touched her now feel like theft? Why did she wake up crying for someone who didn't exist? By mid-morning, she could barely stand. A physician was summoned, a quiet man with sea-gray eyes and a spirit-threaded reading rod. He took her blood in silence, placing a single drop into the jade-lined analyzer rune and whispering an incantation. She didn't care what he found. Maybe it would explain the nausea, the dreams, the tightness in her chest every time she looked in a mirror. The healer returned to afternoon as the sun warmed the area. She was in the garden pavilion, watching fish move through shadowed water. There were several servants attending her. Lady Claire, he said softly, his eyes darting once toward the servants before lowering. May we speak alone? She waved the others away. He hesitated. Then, your meridian shifts are not due to illness, nor deviation. They are transitional. Claire frowned. He swallowed. You're with child. Silence followed the declaration. Birdsong filled the gap. A single leaf drifted into the pond. Claire didn't move, not for several seconds. Then her lips parted. No, it's confirmed, the physician said. The markers are elevated. Your system is adjusting already. That's likely the cause of your physical sensitivity. I can prepare an elixir to stabilize your flow if... Leave. He stopped. She looked at him now, her gaze unwavering. Leave, right now. Tell no one. He bowed and fled. Claire stood while her hands shook, a tremor running through her. She walked to the edge of the pavilion and looked out at the gardens. The lantern tree, the koi pond, everything serene. Controlled. It felt like a lie. She was pregnant, and she already knew who the father was. There was no mystery, no scandal, no second guesses. It was Caleb, the man who had wooed her with confidence and fire. The man who always seemed proudest when she stayed just a step behind him. The man she now avoided, not because she feared him, but because she feared herself. Because every time she looked at him now, she felt wrong. Like her body remembered something her mind didn't. Like this wasn't how it was supposed to go. I had something else. Someone else. I loved him, and I destroyed it. She gripped the pavilion rail until her knuckles turned white, the polished stone cold beneath her fingers. 1,000 memories that weren't hers crowded the edges of her thoughts. Half-formed and painfully sharp. A man's hand in hers, his breath at her shoulder. Her own laughter, softer, warmer than anything Caleb had ever drawn from her. And then her own voice screaming at him, turning away, burning it all down. Why had she done it? And why now did she feel like the universe was punishing her for a crime she couldn't remember committing? Her stomach churned again, a wave of nausea. She didn't cry. Claire Wang did not cry. She stood in the silence and held her breath, trying to decide if this was a beginning or an ending. It felt like both.